Order. I'll call Mark Garnier to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, for 30-minute debates, although there will be obviously opportunities for interventions. I'm sure the Minister will accommodate those. Order, order. Mark Garnier to move the motion.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Sir Mark, and I'm very conscious of the fact we may have to break off to go to some votes, so I will try and keep my words to the point and brief. But first of all, can I open, Sir Mark, by thanking my colleague and neighbour, the Honourable Member for Mid Worcestershire, for stepping into the breach this afternoon. He and I are very good friends. He's an outstanding Trade Policy Minister, and of course he's replying on behalf of Minister Hollingrake, who is held up in Bill Committee. So I appreciate, before we start, that he may not be able to answer every single issue that I intend to raise. But Sir Mark, it was nearly 18 months ago that I first brought my presentation bill to the House, seeking to require the government to look into the possibility of a licensing regime for builders operating in the smaller end of the market, servicing those people, for example, for domestic repairs or small business type of repairs. This is known as the repair, maintenance and improvement sector, and it is the RM&I sector that I want to concentrate on today. So the Minister, and actually when I refer to the Minister, I'm referring in fact to his colleague, who is in fact the Minister for Building. But the Minister will be aware that at the time the government was not minded to even look at the possibility of this sector being regulated. Since then, of course, we've had several new Prime Ministers and a reorganisation of government departments. But I found that the government appears to be, dare I say it, increasingly less interested in talking about this consumer minefield, not more. And indeed, the Minister, who I have an immense amount of respect for, and I have chatted informally about this, and we have agreed to meet together, accompanied by the Federation of Master Builders, who are championing the cause of improved experience for consumers. It has been difficult to get a meeting set up, but I am delighted to say that we now have a meeting in the diary for the beginning of July. Sir Mark, the issue of rogue builders in the RM&I sector is not widespread, but it is appalling when it occurs. I think it's important to call out that actually the majority of builders in this sector are good and decent people. Last week, I had the pleasure of being a judge for the Federation of Master Builders Builder Award of the Year, which is going to be happening later this year. And it's refreshing to see just how innovating building companies are when it comes to training staff, ensuring health and safety, and in some cases offering medical insurance and training for emergencies. Indeed, some of the building firms up for awards demonstrated to me that their reputation is second to none, and that they work tirelessly to ensure longevity of their business through word of mouth and positive endorsements from customers and clients. By all means.
He's absolutely right. And then first of all, bringing this forward, he's absolutely right. Most builders are good workmen and they do a grand job, and that's the case in my constituency as well. But we also have cases of shoddy workmanship, which goes unchallenged as people cannot afford a costly litigation in small claims and feel unable to represent themselves. As a solution to that, Mr Chairman, does the honourable gentleman agree that perhaps maybe local authorities, I know it's different in Northern Ireland than it is in the UK mainland here, but maybe there should be a role for local authorities to take on the case for those people who have shoddy workmanship and haven't got the wherewithal to chase the case themselves? Does he agree that may be an option?
Well, I'm very grateful for the intervention. Actually, to a certain extent, local authorities can step in where it fails to meet building standards. Okay. Yeah. But the problem is it doesn't work. Yeah. And this is what I'm worried about. And so as I unwind my speech, my wonderful friend will be able to sort of understand a little bit about perhaps what I'm proposing, which may be a solution to the problems that he sees in his constituency. But of course, these highly qualified and professional firms are not the target of any control that we possibly may want to bring in. But indeed, a lot of these very, very good quality firms actually would benefit from a simple regime that demonstrates beyond any doubt that a builder firm is legitimate and that the workers within it are both honest and qualified. Repeated surveys from organisations within this sector reinforce that consumers are put off by stories of rogue builders. The FMB estimated a few years ago that up to £3 billion a year is wiped off building activity by consumers fearful of falling victims to rogue. More recently, the Homeowners Alliance conducted a survey of consumer worries. 79% of those surveyed reported obstacles in the way of their project, including 42% reporting it was difficult to find a reliable builder, 29% a lack of available builders, and 15% a lack of confidence in the system. The problem that I, working with the FMB, am trying to address is that of rogue builders who prey on clients who are wholly inexperienced in this area. The vast majority of people who employ a builder have no idea how to manage them. Most of us will only infrequently need the work of a builder or a tradesman. Yes, by all means.
I think my honourable friend for giving way. I have a constituent, Michelle Thomas, who paid £70,000 for some restoration work to her house, and the house was left untenable by, and building regulators said it should be destroyed. But she's paid a further £70,000 and had a very honourable builder come and put it all right. I'm amazed that the government is not minded to regulate on this, because, as my honourable friend says, this would be to the benefit of legitimate, good builders who work very hard and do very good work. One of the issues is we get repeat offenders who time and again offend in this way, and in this particular case, there were 6 liquidations that this particular rogue builder was involved in, and that must be addressed in any legislation.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend.
Mark Garnier.
Thank you, Sir Mark. I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for that intervention, because he raises the most important point. We've had 6 Phoenix companies in terms of wind-ups. What we don't want is another 6 and another 6 victims who've had to have their homes pulled down. And this is why it is. We're trying to come up with a system of regulation that can prevent that. But as I say, most of us will only infrequently need the work of a builder or a tradesman. But when we do, most of us actually get lucky. I think it's important to say this. And we'll hear stories of people who will endorse workers and pass on their names as good quality. But when you get caught by a rogue builder, your life descends into a nightmare. So Mark, I know what it is like. And in the interest of full transparency, I must declare my interest, having found myself in such a position a few years back. And it is because of that experience that I'm keen to help other victims find a way out of this problem and draw this to a close once and for all. But when a problem starts, from poor and potentially dangerous work, as we've already heard about, through to the other end of the scale, fictitious bills, ultimately the only recourse is expensive and legal professional fees. But my experience opened my eyes to just how many people are victims of these types of rogue traders, and in so many different ways. Indeed, road builders do not just prey on their clients. Others who lose out are the subcontractors who are not paid, suppliers who don't get paid, plant hirers who don't get paid and find their plant is quite often stolen, other building firms who don't see business because road builders will undercut their prices only to hike them later. Indeed, all of us lose out through tax fraud, road builders taking cash in hand, dodging VAT and corporation tax. And tax fraud distorts the market, with rogues undercutting legitimate builders, creating a false impression of costs. And as I mentioned before, Sir Mark, the wider economy, where the Federation of Master Builders estimated that billions of pounds of building work is not undertaken because consumers fear being ripped off. After my presentation bill was heard at its second reading, I was contacted by a number of people who heard it and who were the victims of rogue builders themselves. And I also appeared on an ITV programme talking about just this, leading to yet more contacts from other victims. And indeed, the Petitions Committee has contacted me to let me know that there is not 1, but 4 petitions seeking a resolution to this problem. Between them, they've gathered over 4,000 signatures, and I'd urge anyone who is listening to this, who's been a victim or who's interested in resolving this problem, to sign any one of the petitions. But it is the stories of victims that crystallises these problems, that we already heard a little bit earlier. I was contacted by a police officer married to a nurse, 2 fine public servants. They bought their dream home and engaged a builder to renovate it. The work turned out to be massively substandard, failed building standards, and was deemed so dangerous they couldn't move back into their home without remedial work. They contacted trading standards, but the builder is refusing to engage, hiding behind his solicitor. Similarly, somebody else who contacted me who wanted to improve her home so her disabled sister could get access. She was so let down by the system that she was motivated to get in touch with the FMB and has launched one of the petitions I referred to seek a licensing regime. Again, I'd urge listeners to go onto the Parliament petitions page and add their name. But the problem is this. For those who are victims of rogue builders, there is actually little redress. Trading standards will probably have a good go at trying to sort it out, but if the builder holds fast, they can do little more than give them a telling off and flagging up their names for future people. The reality is that the only recourse really for everybody is the courts, but the legal process, Sir Mark, is hopeless. Not in my words, but in the words of a number of solicitors and barristers who advise that irrespective of the merits of the case, the risk of prosecuting was way too high to prosecute the case, so I should just, or other people should just cut their losses. Cut your losses, Mr. Mark. Do we really think that this is a way for 21st century Britain to tackle a known problem that keeps repeating itself? The reality is that road builders hold all the cards. They can do whatever they like, and there is no recourse. Anyone can pick up a brick and call themselves a bricklayer, a plank of wood and call themselves a carpenter, a pipe and call themselves a plumber. Ironically, they can't pick up a gas hob and call themselves a gas fitter. That requires compulsory certification, so there is an acceptance that regulation can be necessary. But when a problem arises, the only redress is in the courts. A consumer can be completely rolled over by a rogue trader, but in order to potentially get redress, they need to put aside up to £150,000 to prosecute a legal case, securing barristers, surveyors, solicitors, court fees, and all the rest of it. And they may win. In fact, they probably will win. But then they need to recover their costs and damages from the builder, who at this point closes their business and moves on to the next scam, having taken all the money out of their business, so there's no way you can recover. The next victim is engaged, and the circus goes on. But our successful litigant is left facing appalling unrecoverable costs. Meanwhile, more suppliers, subcontractors, plant hires, and the wider building trade loses just a little bit more. But the solution is simple. The problem lies in the imbalance of jeopardy between that of the victim and that of the perpetrator. The reason there is so much rogue building going on is because it's an easy way to rip people off. It is in some ways a basic level of fraud, although proving fraud is incredibly difficult. And with no loss to the perpetrator, they can go on and on and on, whilst the victim bears all the costs. So how do we balance the jeopardy between the victim and the rogue builder? The answer must lie in regulation, with something such as a compulsory licence that the builder will lose if he or she falls foul of the rules. Rules, by the way, that can and will save lives. The phone was.
On the issue of road builders who will often go into liquidation in order to avoid potential litigation or paying out when they have been taken to court and successfully sued, should we perhaps also be looking at the potential of actually holding the individual responsible in a fiduciary manner, not just the company? Because that has may have a much more effective mechanism of actually people being able to chase potential assets that they can then charge against successful litigation.
My honourable friend raises the nub of the whole point. At the end of the day, individuals have to find some sort of personal liability if they perpetrate these endless infringements. The point is they have nothing to lose at the moment. If they run the risk of losing their livelihood, then they will think again before they do this. Maybe they go on to another type of criminal activity, but we'd at least get them out of the building market. But the Minister and I have had informal conversations about this, and I know that he and the Minister who replied to my bill's second reading in 2021 are instinctively against licensing and over-regulation. So to a certain extent, I can see their point. Why burden an industry that allows opportunity to people who choose to work with their hands and avoid a life of form-filling? Indeed, I can see from the Minister's Wikipedia, not this Minister, but the Minister he's standing in for, the Minister's Wikipedia entry that he was a very successful estate agent. There is limited regulation around estate agents beyond the EEA 1979 and the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations 2008. I, however, conversely, was an investment banker and an investment manager. I know what it's like to be regulated up to the eyeballs, and having been on the Treasury Select Committee during the bringing of the Financial Services and Markets Act 2012 and on the Banking Commission for the Banking Reform Act 2014, I can see why people might accuse me of being an instinctive regulator. But even residential estate agents have to be a member of a redress scheme. The Minister's estate agency would have been required to be signed up to either the Property Ombudsman or the Property Redress Scheme. Without membership, I understand they would not have been allowed to trade under the Consumer Estate Agents Redress Act 2007. So, Mark, when I or the two victims I referred to earlier, or any of the millions of people who want to improve their home, undertake this momentous challenge, something they may, as I've already referred to, only do once or twice in their lives, they start by approaching an architect. They may speak to surveyors, and they may go to their bank or mortgage broker to secure a loan to pay for the improvements. They will apply for planning permission from a local planning authority. They may even seek legal advice. And then they will engage a builder. The architect is regulated by the Architects Registration Board, established by the Architects Act in 1987. The surveyor is required to be a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, set up by Royal Charter and independent of the government. The mortgage broker is required to be regulated by the Financial Conduct Conduct Authority set up by this government and cannot trade without that membership. The Local Planning Authority is subject to the oversight of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. When our home improver starts to pay the builder, it is done from a bank regulated by both the Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulatory Authority, the latter of which is run by the Bank of England, both set up by Financial Services and Markets Act 2012. Legal advice is regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, and our home improver then pays the money, their hard-earned cash, that they've had to go through umpteen regulatory hoops, to someone with no meaningful regulation whatsoever. This is ridiculous. Not only is the builder not subject to any meaningful regulation, but they could also do something that results in someone being severely injured or even losing their life. And it's all very well saying that the builder may then be subject to criminal proceedings, but that is small consolation to the relatives of a dead father or a mother with life-changing injuries. The only outcome that would, I believe, be satisfactory would a scheme whereby builders who are honest and decent, the majority, by the way, would be both happy to sign up to and would enjoy the benefit of the scheme through being part of a system of excellence. Meanwhile, those rogue builders who either game the system or care not one iota about their customers will have something to lose. And without membership of whatever scheme we come up with, they will never be able to trade ever again, either as individuals or as businesses. So my appeal to the Minister was originally going to be to ask for a meeting, but I am absolutely delighted that the Minister has got in touch, or the Minister's office has got in touch. And I have every confidence that there is nothing will get in the way of the diary in order to stop this meeting happening. Slightly bell right there. But I'm very much looking forward to meeting the Minister, I think, in the early part of July. But the really important point is will his department, who I know have been working to a certain extent with this, but will his department work with us to find a solution once and for all to this problem, to stop the scourge of rogue builders once and for all? All of us, every one of us who comes to Parliament, balks at unnecessary regulation. But just how long are we prepared to knowingly allow people to be ripped off without any usable form of redress? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I now call the Minister. Oh, sorry. The question is that this House has considered rogue traders. Minister.
Thank you, Sir Mark. And I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Wyre Forest, on securing this debate. He's a great champion for his constituents and for many causes that impact right across the country, this, of course, being one. And I'm well aware that he has proposed a private member's bill in the past to improve consumer protection from rogue builders. I'm also grateful to him for giving other honourable members the opportunity to discuss this important subject today, and thank the honourable member for Strangford, Clacton and Central Suffolk for their contributions, because this is an issue which I suspect every single one of us, every single member has had correspondence and interaction with constituents about. It impacts right across the country. And I do want to assure the honourable gentleman that the government is indeed committed to ensuring that there are high standards within the construction industry and that consumers can have confidence that work they commission will be undertaken competently and comply with the building regulations to ensure safety. We're also committed to ensuring that there are high standards of consumer protection and redress for those where the work they pay for falls short of acceptable standards of quality and safety. The construction industry makes a great contribution to the UK economy. In 2021, it had a turnover of £439 billion, accounting for nearly 9% of the economy and employing 2.2 million people in about 430,000 firms with an additional 700,000 self-employed workers. That itself speaks to some of the challenges the honourable gentleman mentioned in terms of the fragmented nature of this industry. He's also right to point out that the vast majority of those engaged in this sector are hard-working, honourable and decent people. But there are rogues, there's no doubt about it. The domestic repair, maintenance and improvement sector is a vital part of the industry, employing about 60% of all those who work within it. And the small firms and tradespeople who make up this sector do deliver essential work to people right across the country. They play an important role now, and one which will only become more important as we seek to improve the environment and carbon performance of homes. They're critical to our approach to reducing the 40% of carbon emissions generated by the built environment and achieving our net zero targets. However, it's also a part of the industry where genuine concerns around consumer protection do indeed exist. As I said, whilst the majority of tradespeople are honest and competent and provide excellent service, there are some incompetent or dishonest firms and individuals who exploit consumers, who undertake defective work or overcharge for the services that they deliver. This must be stopped, and the government is committed to working with the industry and local authority trading standards to improve standards of competence and consumer protection and to take action against rogue builders. Whilst we are not convinced that the introduction of a licensing scheme is such a large and varied sector would be practical or cost-effective, I hope that I will be able to reassure the honourable gentleman and other honourable members that the government takes the issue of consumer protection from rogue builders seriously and that we're taking meaningful action. The government has taken action to strengthen consumer rights. For example, the Consumer Rights Act 2015 sets out the standards that consumers can expect when a trader supplies goods and services, including building work, and remedies if these rights are breached. Under the Act, traders are required to carry out a service with reasonable care and skill, and where the time frame is not specified in the contract, within a reasonable time frame. Where a trader fails to meet the standards required by the CRA for the supply of a service, or if the service does not conform to the contract, there is likely to be breach of contract and the consumer is entitled to ask for a repeat performance of the service or for a price reduction. And if a trader and a consumer cannot agree to a remedy, the consumer can pursue a claim against the trader in the courts. And the small claims procedure provides the means to pursue a claim up to £10,000 at a modest cost and without the need of a solicitor. And consumers have up to 6 years to bring a claim against a trader for breach of contract. The government has also signalled its intention to go further in order to protect consumers with provisions in the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Bill, which will give enforcement bodies the power to levy tougher fines. However, we know that many individuals and businesses are reluctant to have recourse to the courts to resolve a dispute, with the costs and time that this entails. Sure.
The point of the small claims court, but he will also be aware that for even relatively modest building works, the cost is likely to exceed £10,000, which is the rough small claims court limit. So for many people in this situation who are the victims of rogue builders, that is not a form of redress that's open to them.
Yes, we are aware of the challenges of the small claims court, and of course many building works go above £10,000. I know that the MOJ is also looking at other forms of redress and other procedures as well, and I understand that these are live considerations within government, and I'd be happy to make his comments or forward his comments to other relevant ministers. But we do understand the challenges with the small claims court. It works in many circumstances, but it is not right for everybody. So we know that consumers would prefer swift, cost-effective and less time-consuming measures to settle their differences with business. And that is why, following the recommendations of the independent Each Home Courts Review in 2016, the government has worked with the industry to establish the Trustmark scheme. This created the first government-endorsed quality scheme for homeowners across a range of trades and types of work. Trustmark provides consumers with a single brand to identify schemes run within the industry that require participating firms and tradespeople to demonstrate competence and which provide for consumer redress. We're also working with the industry to ensure that high standards of consumer protection are embedded in domestic household. Yep.
The Trustmark scheme is great. It's a very good start, but it's not compulsory. And the problem is, if it's not compulsory, then a lot of consumers don't necessarily know about it. And if you don't know about it, you don't know whether you should be asking for it in the first place. The key point is we could run on Trustmark, but it needs to be compulsory if that becomes the standard.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand the arguments that the Honourable Gentleman's making, and he's right, it's not compulsory, but it is a really important signal. So I think it's a really good signal to the industry. It's government endorsed, which I think is also important. And we certainly encourage people when they're seeking such works to look for that trust mark, because it is an important indicator. I think in this area, and all the themes that he's raised today, the important principle is getting the right balance. And he acknowledged it in his speech, of not overburdening industry and many small traders, most of whom operate very effectively and professionally, but making sure that we've got systems and processes in place that where things go wrong, there's appropriate redress. He mentioned as well that the temptation, certainly for most of us, is not to overburden businesses with regulation. There will always be an ongoing debate, and I also should appreciate the Honourable Gentleman has had consistent engagement with the Department, multiple ministers, and of course brought many other representations from industry to the attention of the Department, which we do appreciate, because these are live debates that are ongoing.
Could I, just before we take an intervention, could I just tell members present that this is meant to be a short debate, and I understand that we're possibly going to have as many as 5 votes when the votes are called. Yeah. So in the short time we've available, I'd be grateful if we could minimise interventions.
Way. Is it not the case that historically we've relied on the cry caveat emptor so much so that we've not regulated, but the time has come to regulate now?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the appropriate minister has heard his appeals, and I promise to make sure that I pass those comments on. I think the key thing is it's all a matter of getting the right balance, and if things work, we've got the balance right. If things are not working properly, then we need to reassess that balance. And I can assure him that on an ongoing basis, officials and ministers are paying close attention to what's going on in this sector. Many of the things that he and colleagues today have been appealing for are being appealed for by many people, but there's also some quite strong opposition for good reason. So it is a matter of balance. I'll bring my comments to a close very shortly, Sir Mark. But on decarbonisation, we are working with the industry to ensure that high standards of consumer protection are embedded in our domestic household decarbonation retrofit programmes. Government-funded schemes require installers, for example, to hold appropriate certifications, and the government is also seeking to increase the number of qualified and competent tradespeople and ensure that they have the skills to deliver the quality of work required. We've already provided nearly £7 million to fund 8,000 training opportunities for the energy efficiency and low-carbon heating supply chains, and we're considering options to work with the industry to support further training in key skills shortage areas and new routes of entry to increase capacity. My department's also working closely with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities to strengthen the consumer protections available through competent persons schemes. In conclusion, Sir Mark, I would like to once again thank my honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Wyre Forest, for securing this debate on an important issue. I hope that I have been able to reassure honourable members that the government is not only committed to, but taking action to ensure that high standards of consumer protection exist and to tackle the problem of road builders and tradespeople. Thank you, Sir Mark.
So the question is that this House has considered government policy on tackling rogue builders. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order. We've a couple of minutes before